Love is not usually what truly unsettles an avoidant. Neither is affection, attention, or deep loyalty. They can walk away from all of those things and persuade themselves they are completely fine. Over time, they become skilled at shutting off emotions, creating distance, and hiding meaningful memories beneath work, busy routines, and logical explanations. Little by little, they convince themselves that emotional independence is real strength and that relying on no one is the safest way to live. They spend years building emotional walls until they barely remember what those walls were meant to protect. Yet there are three simple words that reach places inside them where love alone often cannot. Three quiet words that slip through defenses built over a lifetime. Three words that gently challenge the identity they have worked so hard to protect. The surprising part is that these words do not bring comfort at first. They create discomfort before they create peace. They awaken tension. They spark an inner conflict that often causes an avoidant to step back before they ever think about moving closer. This is where so many people misunderstand avoidant behavior. They assume avoidants are running away from love itself, but that is rarely the real story. More often, they are running from everything real love asks of them. Stay with this, because what comes next explains why even the strongest emotional walls are never as permanent as they seem. The answer is much deeper than most people ever realize. And once you see it, you may never look at avoidant behavior the same way again. Real intimacy asks a person to face parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. It uncovers fears they would rather leave buried. It shines light into emotional places they have carefully hidden for a long time. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, that experience can feel more frightening than being completely alone. Beneath the surface, an even deeper process is quietly unfolding. Many avoidants carry an invisible belief that almost nobody notices. Often they are not fully aware of it themselves. If someone asked them to explain it, they might struggle to find the right words. Yet that hidden belief quietly shapes almost every relationship they have. It influences who they trust. It explains why they suddenly leave when everything seems to be going well. It reveals why they become distant just as a relationship starts feeling meaningful and emotionally important. Those three simple words strike directly at this hidden belief. That is why they remain unforgettable. That is why they continue echoing in their thoughts long after the conversation ends, sometimes months later, sometimes even years later, because for one brief moment, those words force them to face a question they have spent most of their life trying not to answer. It is a question about their own worth, a question about vulnerability, a question about whether it is finally safe to stop running. Keep watching, because understanding this single moment can completely change the way you see emotional distance. Most people never notice when that turning point quietly appears. Instead, they chase harder. They give more of themselves. They try to prove they deserve love, believing that enough effort will finally create the connection they long for. But while they keep pushing forward, the avoidant often retreats even deeper into the emotional fortress they built years ago. The harder the pursuit becomes, the stronger those defenses often grow. That is why pressure almost never creates closeness. People who truly understand avoidant psychology recognize something completely different. They know that genuine connection cannot be forced. It does not grow through endless reassurance, emotional pressure, or constant pursuit. It begins when someone feels emotionally safe enough to lower their guard because they genuinely choose to, not because someone pushed them into it. That is where these three simple words become incredibly powerful. They do not demand. They do not chase. They do not corner someone emotionally. Instead, they quietly create space where trust can slowly begin to grow. And sometimes, in that quiet space, an avoidant experiences something unfamiliar. They stop fighting for a moment. They stop hiding. They stop convincing themselves they need no one. What happens after that surprises almost everyone, and it reveals why the smallest words can sometimes create the biggest emotional shift of all. By the end of this conversation, you will understand why these three words can hold more power than dramatic romantic gestures, endless promises, or years of trying to convince someone they are loved. Because what an avoidant quietly desires is often very different from what they openly show. The distance between what they deeply need inside and what they express on the outside explains so much of their behavior. Once you understand that hidden difference, you may never see avoidant patterns the same way again. The first word is not the one most people would predict. The second one reaches a much deeper emotional place. And the third word touches the very core of the avoidant's inner world. That final word connects directly with the fear that has silently influenced so many of their choices throughout their life. At the center of every avoidant is a contradiction that many people fail to notice. From the outside, they can appear confident, independent, emotionally unaffected, and completely comfortable with distance. They often seem like people who do not truly need anyone. They protect their freedom. They value personal space. They prefer feeling in control of their own emotions and their own lives. But underneath that carefully protected image is a person who carries the same human desire for connection, understanding, and belonging that everyone else experiences. The difference is that those desires have been buried under years of emotional protection. Stay with this, because the reason behind their behavior is much deeper than simple coldness or a lack of feelings. At some point in their journey, many avoidants learned painful emotional lessons. They began to believe that depending on someone could eventually lead to disappointment. They learned that opening up could result in being hurt. They started seeing emotional closeness as something that could create danger instead of comfort. The walls they created were never built because they wanted to push people away. Those walls were created because, in their mind, they were necessary for survival. They were a way to protect themselves from emotional pain. But the heartbreaking part is that emotional walls cannot always recognize the difference between something harmful and something healing. They block both heartbreak and love. They prevent pain from entering, but they also prevent genuine connection from reaching them. This is why many people misunderstand what an avoidant truly needs. They assume the solution is simply giving more love, more affection, more attention, more messages, more reassurance. They believe that if they prove their commitment strongly enough, the avoidant will finally feel secure. But emotional healing rarely happens because someone gives another person a larger amount of emotion. It happens when someone feels truly seen, understood, and accepted. When an avoidant already feels emotionally overloaded, extra intensity can feel less like comfort and more like pressure. What was intended as love can start feeling like a demand. What was meant to create closeness can begin to feel like losing independence. And then the same painful pattern begins again. The avoidant pulls away. The other person reaches harder. The emotional space between them becomes larger. Confusion grows. Both people feel the hurt, yet neither fully understands why it keeps happening. The deeper truth is that avoidants are often not afraid of the person in front of them. They are afraid of what that person brings out from within them. That one difference changes the entire picture. Many people assume an avoidant is rejecting the relationship itself, but often they are actually trying to escape the emotions that the relationship awakens. Connection brings old fears to the surface. Intimacy activates needs they have spent years trying to silence. The closer someone gets, the stronger the internal struggle can become. One part of them wants to move toward love. Another part tells them to stay protected. One side desires connection. The other side warns them to create distance. Without awareness and healing, this invisible battle can continue for months, years, or even an entire lifetime. When you look closely at human behavior, one powerful pattern becomes clear. The things people fear the most are often connected to the things they secretly want the most. Someone who fears failure may still dream of success. Someone who fears rejection may deeply desire acceptance. Someone who fears emotional closeness may actually be longing for a bond deeper than anyone realizes. Avoidants often live inside this same contradiction every single day. They want love, but they fear depending on someone. They want closeness, but they fear becoming vulnerable. They want to be understood, but they fear revealing the parts of themselves they have hidden for so long. And this is exactly why those three simple words can reach a place that ordinary reassurance often cannot. They want to feel understood, yet at the same time they fear being completely seen. Living with these two opposite desires creates a constant inner struggle, which is why their actions can sometimes appear confusing, distant, or unpredictable. Somewhere in their past, whether through early life experiences, emotional disconnection, painful connections, or repeated moments of disappointment, they learned a belief that quietly shaped the way they approach relationships. It may never have been directly spoken. It may not even be something they consciously recognize, but it became a hidden rule inside their mind. The rule is simple. When people get too close, eventually pain will come. Once this belief becomes deeply rooted, many of their choices begin to revolve around preventing that pain. Distance starts to feel like protection. Independence becomes part of their personality. Relying only on themselves becomes a way to survive emotionally. Over time, these protective habits become so familiar that they no longer see them as defenses. They simply believe this is who they are. But something interesting happens when an avoidant encounters someone who does not follow the same emotional pattern they have experienced before. Instead of chasing them, that person stays patient and emotionally steady. Instead of demanding constant reassurance, they maintain their own confidence and self-worth. Instead of pushing for immediate closeness, they allow trust to develop naturally. Suddenly, the avoidant is no longer responding to pressure from someone else. They are left facing their own inner world. They can no longer blame emotional expectations or overwhelming demands for the discomfort they feel. They have to sit with the fears they have spent years trying to escape, and this is the exact moment when the first word begins to reveal its true power. That word is simple. That word is understood. At first glance, this word may seem too basic to create any real emotional impact. It does not sound like a dramatic declaration of love. It is not a grand romantic promise. It is not a powerful emotional speech that creates instant change. Because of that, many people completely underestimate what it can mean. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, the feeling of being understood can reach a place that many other words cannot. Understood. Not repaired, not transformed, not examined like a problem. Simply understood. There is a profound difference between those experiences. Many avoidants move through life feeling as though people only see the surface version of them. Their emotional distance is often mistaken for not caring. Their quietness is interpreted as a lack of feelings. Their need for space is viewed as a personal rejection. Very few people slow down and ask what is happening beneath those behaviors. Even fewer try to understand without immediately judging, criticizing, or trying to change them. This is where emotional safety begins. When someone feels truly seen, their mind and body no longer feel the same need to stay constantly guarded. The pressure to explain themselves, defend their choices, or prove that they are not a bad person begins to decrease. For an avoidant, that experience can feel unusual because they are often familiar with being misunderstood. They are used to hearing that they are too distant, too detached, or too difficult to reach. They are often told what they should feel, what they should want, and how they should express themselves. But then someone appears with a completely different message. I understand you. Not because they know every detail of their history, not because they can explain every fear they carry, but because they can see the person underneath the protective behaviors. Stay with this, because this is where many people finally understand what an avoidant has been searching for all along. That moment can sometimes reach deeper than simply hearing the words, I love you. Love is powerful, but love can also feel overwhelming. Love can create fear. Love can feel like a responsibility they are not prepared to carry. Understanding feels different. Understanding creates room to breathe. It creates a feeling of acceptance without pressure. And without emotional safety, real intimacy struggles to grow. This reveals something important about human nature. Every person carries private struggles that others may never notice. Every person has hidden fears, silent battles, and parts of themselves they hope someone will recognize. Everyone wants to feel accepted for who they truly are beneath the surface. Avoidants are no different. In many cases, because they spend so much energy protecting their vulnerability, their desire to be truly understood can become even stronger. There is another reason this simple word holds so much power. Understanding does not mean agreeing with every choice someone makes. It does not mean accepting unhealthy behavior or ignoring problems. It simply means recognizing another person's emotional reality before trying to change it. That type of presence is becoming increasingly rare. Many people listen only to prepare their next reply. They hear the words but miss the emotions behind them. They react quickly instead of trying to understand deeply. Avoidants often notice this difference, even when they do not talk about it. They recognize the people who try to control them. They recognize the people who constantly attempt to fix them. They recognize those who want them to become someone else before they can be accepted. But they also notice the rare person who approaches them with patience and genuine curiosity. The person whose first intention is not to change them, but simply to understand them. And when that happens, something quietly begins to shift inside the avoidant. A door that has been closed for years starts to open, not because someone forced it, but because for the first time they feel safe enough to unlock it themselves. Their emotional walls do not disappear in a single moment. Their fears do not suddenly dissolve. Their protective habits remain in place, but something small begins to change. A tiny opening appears inside the emotional fortress they have spent years creating. A quiet thought slowly begins forming in their mind. Maybe this person really is different. Maybe I do not have to stay defensive all the time. Maybe I can relax my guard just a little. Maybe I can allow myself to be seen without immediately expecting criticism or disappointment. That small possibility carries more meaning than most people understand, because every meaningful transformation begins with a question. Every emotional breakthrough begins with the idea that another reality could exist. For an avoidant, the belief that they can finally be understood may become the first genuine step toward the connection they have secretly desired for so long. But this is only the beginning. The journey does not end here. The second word reaches an even deeper place. It touches the hidden fear beneath many of their other fears. And when that word becomes part of the connection, their entire emotional experience starts shifting in ways most people never anticipate. That first opening inside an avoidant cannot simply be forced wider. It requires patience, awareness, and emotional safety. A person who has spent years protecting themselves does not suddenly drop their defenses just because someone is kind or caring. In fact, when emotions rise too quickly or become too intense, their nervous system may not recognize it as love. It may interpret it as a warning sign. This is where many relationships begin struggling. One person feels like the bond is finally becoming stronger. The avoidant feels like they are slowly losing their personal freedom. What feels like emotional progress to one person can feel like emotional pressure to the other. Stay with this, because this is the hidden reason why some connections become stronger while others slowly fall apart. The painful reality is that the more one person tries to hold the relationship tightly, the stronger the avoidance instinct to create distance can become. Beneath this pattern is a deeper emotional process that many people overlook. Avoidants are not only afraid of needing someone else, they are often afraid of disappearing inside the relationship. Somewhere in their emotional history, closeness became connected with losing themselves. This is not always a conscious belief. It is often an emotional pattern created through past experiences. A part of them begins to believe that allowing someone too close may eventually mean losing control, losing independence, or becoming shaped by another person's expectations. This is why simple reassurance often cannot solve the deeper issue. Reassurance may calm uncertainty for a moment, but it does not completely heal the fear of losing their own identity. And that fear can be much stronger than people realize. When an avoidant hears that someone loves them deeply, two opposite reactions may happen at the same time. One part of them feels warmth, one part feels relief, but another hidden part immediately starts searching for possible danger. Their mind quietly begins asking questions. What will this relationship require from me? What parts of myself will I have to give up? If I completely accept this love, what will I lose in return? They may never say these thoughts aloud. They may not even recognize them clearly. But these fears often influence their choices. This is why avoidant behavior can appear so confusing. They move closer, then suddenly create distance. They share something personal, then quickly return behind their emotional walls. They show care, then become quiet. Usually this is not about trying to hurt someone. It is an internal conflict happening in real time. At this stage, emotional understanding becomes far more powerful than emotional intensity. Many people believe stronger feelings automatically create stronger bonds. But strong emotions without emotional safety can create pressure, and pressure often activates self-protection. Avoidants are especially sensitive to anything that feels like expectation or emotional demand. Even small things can sometimes feel heavier than they appear. A message saying, "I miss you," can feel loving and comforting. But when the same message appears constantly with an expectation for a certain response, it can start feeling like a responsibility they must carry. The words remain the same. The emotional meaning changes because the pressure changes, and that difference can create distance. Eventually, almost every relationship involving an avoidant reaches a turning point. It either becomes a cycle of anxiety and withdrawal, or it slowly develops into deeper trust. The deciding factor is not simply how much love is shown. It is whether that love leaves enough room for both people to breathe. Space is not the opposite of connection. For an avoidant, healthy space can actually become the foundation of emotional safety. It allows them to stay connected without feeling trapped. Without freedom, even genuine affection can begin to feel overwhelming. But when freedom and connection exist together, something different becomes possible. When an avoidant experiences closeness without their nervous system immediately reacting with fear, a new emotional pattern begins to form. However, this is also where many people make a major mistake. They see distance and immediately assume rejection. Then they respond by trying harder. They send more messages. They explain their feelings more intensely. They offer endless reassurance. They believe more effort will create more security. But from the avoidance perspective, increased emotional intensity can feel like increased pressure. A simple misunderstanding becomes a repeated cycle. One person moves forward, while the other steps back. Both believe they are protecting the relationship, yet neither realizes their nervous system is guiding their actions. This is where the second word reveals its importance: respect. Respect provides something that love alone cannot always create. It removes the feeling of being controlled. It communicates a powerful message. I am not here to force you. I am not here to cross your boundaries. I am not here to take away your independence. Respect tells an avoidant that their need for space is not automatically wrong. Their boundaries matter. Their quiet moments will not always be punished. Their temporary distance will not always be chased. Most importantly, they are not someone who needs to be repaired like a problem. They are a person who deserves understanding while they grow. Experiences like these slowly begin changing the way an avoidant sees connection. They start asking new questions. Maybe closeness does not always mean losing myself. Maybe love does not require giving up my freedom. Maybe someone can stay near me without trying to control me. This transformation does not happen through one dramatic conversation. It happens through small moments. Calm discussions, respected boundaries, times when space is offered without guilt or punishment. Slowly, their nervous system begins creating new expectations. Maybe intimacy can be safe. Maybe vulnerability does not always end in pain. But respect alone is not the complete answer. It creates safety, but it does not erase every fear. An avoidant may become loyal, committed, and emotionally present, while a small part of them still waits for evidence that deeper vulnerability will not eventually hurt them. Before reaching the third word, one important truth must be understood. Distance does not always mean rejection. Silence does not always mean a lack of care. Pulling away is often a protective reaction when emotions become more intense than their nervous system knows how to process. They are not always choosing separation. Sometimes their mind is simply trying to reduce emotional overload. Avoidants are also extremely sensitive to authenticity. They often notice the difference between genuine care and hidden pressure. Forced closeness feels unnatural, and anything that feels unnatural can quickly feel unsafe. But when connection grows naturally, they no longer feel chased, they feel welcomed. And that difference can completely change the way they experience love. That small difference changes everything. At this point, an avoidant often finds themselves standing between two very different worlds. One world feels familiar. It is built on emotional distance, control, independence, and self-protection. The other world feels uncertain but carries a quiet hope. It is the possibility of experiencing closeness without feeling like they are losing themselves. During this stage, they silently watch, observe, and evaluate. They are trying to understand whether this connection will recreate the same emotional pain they have known before, or whether it can offer something completely different. This is why patience becomes so important. Trust is not created through overwhelming emotions or intense promises. Trust develops through repeated experiences where closeness does not threaten freedom, where personal space is respected, and where returning after distance is met with understanding instead of punishment. Those small moments slowly create the foundation for something even deeper than respect. Because the deepest fear for many avoidants is not simply intimacy itself. The deeper fear is who they might have to become if they completely allow themselves to receive love. Understanding and respect create emotional stability, but a protected part of them still waits for evidence that love will not become control, responsibility, or the loss of their own identity. The nervous system does not change because someone explains something perfectly. It changes through repeated emotional experiences. When closeness repeatedly feels like pressure, the mind begins connecting intimacy with danger. When distance repeatedly brings relief, withdrawal becomes the safer choice. Eventually, these responses happen automatically. One part of them wants connection, while another part creates distance before the bond becomes too deep. It is not because they lack feelings. It is because emotional memories are competing with what is happening in the present. Avoidants are often misunderstood as people who do not feel deeply, but that is usually far from the truth. Many avoidants are actually emotionally sensitive people who learned, often early in life, that depending on others could lead to disappointment, rejection, or emotional pain. Instead of learning that closeness can create comfort and security, they learned that safety comes from creating space. Being alone felt easier to predict. Keeping emotional distance gave them a sense of control. Over time, this pattern became their main way of handling difficult emotions. But every protective strategy has a hidden cost. While distance can protect them from feeling overwhelmed, it can also prevent them from experiencing the deep connection they secretly desire.